I wanted to start off by just sort of getting into, I guess before we get into like your vocal stuff and everything, I just wanted to know if you drink coffee, if you can tell me a little bit about your coffee habits, if you do, or if there's any sort of drink you feel committed to.
I love this podcast already. Thank you for having me. Yes, I drink coffee. I love coffee. And my friend Lori Antonioli, a wonderful singer from San Francisco, sent me the entire rig to make really good filter coffee with the right pot to, the right cone filter shape, and a coffee grinder that grinds the coffee just before you use it. So it's my morning ritual, and I love coffee.
Awesome. Do you drink it black or with any sort of cream or sugar?
Well,
or anything?
it depends on the grind, and usually I put a little bit of milk in it, but I've come to sort of do less and less of that because the coffee I'm now buying, because of this grinder I have, is really, really good. So actually I can drink it without milk, and that is my favorite thing to do when I have a good grind.
Yeah, I'm a coffee professional by day, but I guess I was sort of intuiting or trying to intuit what your coffee preferences would be, and I sort of was wondering also, like, if being a vocalist, if you have to consider anything additionally, like if coffee affects, anything like that.
Well, if you're recording in the studio with a very sensitive, good mic, coffee dries out your throat. It's a diuretic, and so you hear these sounds. I'm going to go very close to the mic now. When you're singing, and that's really annoying,
right,
to take those little clicks out. So it's best not to drink coffee right before. Not that I adhere to this rule.
Do you drink tea at all as well, or are you just all coffee? Cool.
Tea to me is just brown water. Like, I don't feel like there's anything in it. I have really good, what's it called, builder's tea from Ireland. And it's very flavorful, but I never feel like it's the same satisfaction, that I get from coffee. And again, the ritual is a big part of it for me. Like, I used to get into espressos and make espressos on the stovetop, but the pour over thing now, it's the best, and it has the most caffeine. So,
well, I'm glad that we're very much on the same page here.
Yeah.
So we can move on from coffee. Let's talk about some music stuff. I was thinking of how to introduce you, and to say a vocalist just seems like it doesn't get the point across at all. And I know that you are an accomplished ice skater, and that Ben tells me that you are into visual arts, and I'm curious if there's a sort of way that you integrate these different domains into like a sort of compressed sense of self, or like if it's just you do what you do, or is there any sort of way that you organize that in your mind?
So I think the tree trunk of my artistic, I hate the word artist to begin with, my sort of output here is through my voice. And then all the other sort of byways and ramps can lead to different places, like my visual artwork, or movement, or performance art, or composition, or improvisation, or whatever is on the side of that. But mainly it's through my voice that I express myself. And so I sometimes get into these sort of zones of mainly doing artwork for a couple of weeks or a month or two or so, but I always come back to singing, and music is basically where I'm at. What I like about venturing out is that they can influence each other. So my artwork has greatly influenced my compositional understanding, and what works and what doesn't, and what I like, and so it reflects back on itself. And I think that the visual arts sometimes have an advantage of not having to deal with time, with the element of time and people sitting there, except for performance art perhaps, or sound art. But if you can close your eyes and walk away if you don't like a painting. But if you're in a concert, you sit there and you just have to deal with the fact that you went there, and you
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to leave this hall now, and you paid all this money to sit there and all this stuff. So it's a different. You can take different risks when you're visually expressing yourself.
Interesting.
And you apply different principles, and so I'm trying to cross discipline. And learn from the different disciplines. The same with dance or with ice skating, I guess. So yeah, that's sort of the long answer.
So that's interesting that you mentioned time in that way. That's I was going to ask something very much in that language, and so I'm glad that you beat me to it. Do you think about space in the same way? Like, you know, with movement, I feel like you're dealing with a whole other range of space, and you know, with music, it's, you know, almost just like a bidirectional thing, or like a just two ears, you know, to have the same sense of space. Do you think about that the same way?
Yeah, I think definitely. I mean, for me, music is very visual. So oftentimes especially when we're not dealing with lyrics or emotional content that's directly from, you know, me, but more abstract ideas of music making. And so I always see shapes and colors, and it's not synesthetic necessarily, but there's a very strong connection for me with visual ideas. The way I memorize is visually, photographically. So yeah, for me, it's an architecture. It's a depth perception also. Like something could have a sense of flatness, or could be very, very deep and sort of go three-dimensional in how I perceive sound or compositions at a certain place. It is very visual.
Cool. Before we really dive into too much music stuff, I just have to sort of ask a little bit about ice skating. It's, you know, I'm in Los Angeles, and it seems exotic to me, and sort of I'm just curious if that's something that you have to like maintain your chops with, or if you just feel like they're always there. Do you like how's that fit into your life currently?
It's not always there at all. It's actually you lose it very, very quickly, because unlike dance, you don't move over ice. First of all, you need these weird shoes that have blades on the bottom, which are sharp as a knife, by the way. And so you're basically learning how to walk first, and then you can dance on the blades. But first, you really have to be able to skate very effortlessly. And I remember one skating session when I was maybe 16 or 17, and it was 6:30 in the morning. We always had these brutally early skating times. And I remember suddenly, for the first time after years and years of skating, suddenly feeling, oh, I'm actually skating. Like, I'm not thinking about skating, I'm just skating. So this idea of the effortlessness takes much longer, because when you're dancing, whenever you start dancing, whether it's at the age of 2 or 3, you've already walked. But when you start skating, unless you grew up on, you know, skates every day, which is highly unlikely, you have to spend a lot of time on the ice, making that feel natural and just effortless. And so that was really the revelation I had. Suddenly it's like, oh my God, finally. It doesn't feel like I'm doing something really unnatural, which it is. It's completely bizarre. Skates were invented for transportation in Holland, skating through the canals in the winter, and they used, you know, animal bone under their shoes, and so it was for transportation. It wasn't really for artistic expression or dance or any of that. So it's a super artificial set. Like it's exotic, as you said. Like, you think if an alien came down and would lift the roof of a skating rink, like, what would they built this ice in this shape? Why this shape? Why 2 people or 1 person only on this big thing, or a whole bunch of people and it's a whole mess and you can't do anything? What is this? It's completely strange.
Yeah, that does seem unnatural. But do you still maintain your practice today? Like, do you have
Yeah, I did a performance of Schubert's Winter's Journey, which I renamed WinterIce, which in German is Die Winterreise. So I thought WinterIce was actually how Americans pronounce it anyway, Die Winterreise. And it sounds like WinterIce. And so I did a version of it with Uri Caine and the Ice Theater of New York. And we got National Sawdust, which is a performance space in Williamsburg, to agree to let us set up a synthetic patch of ice for the audience. It's small, very, very small patch, maybe 15 feet by 10 or something, not very, no, maybe more, 25 feet, let's say. And so I recreated this song cycle with two other skaters, and I had to get my chops back up. I think this was 2018 or 2017, something like that. Anyway, so I went to the Ice Theater of New York, which was the umbrella organization for this event, getting the synthetic ice to National Sawdust and all that. So I started training again, and I realized, first of all, how rusty I was and how much I can't do. But then it came back very, very quickly, and it was so fun, and it was so joyous.
Awesome.
And I realized that a lot of my music and my sort of ideas come from the sort of perpetual motion that you get when you skate, which is round edges. There's no hard stops unless you actually stop. But once you're in motion, you just want to keep that motion going and going and going. And so that's sort of something that I've noticed in my own work, that is sort of a sense of perpetual motion with soft edges around it.
The last guest I spoke to was the composer John Link, who we talked a lot about the music of Elliott Carter, and I was interested that so much of Carter's music was about continuity, which this sort of reminds me of. And so, well, anyway, we'll have things to get through here to ask you some. Let's talk here about some vocal stuff. I'm sort of curious, like, the vocal instrument is like the only biological instrument that I really know of, like in terms of having material that's biological and stuff, like, steel and wood and stuff. Is this something that you think about, or like, do you feel like that makes you vocals distinct in some way?
I always have this issue with people saying, "Oh, the voice is the first instrument." Like, what does that make it better, or are we there for what? So usually the point is, well, so if that's the first instrument, then it maybe it's not, that doesn't mean anything to me. Like, what are you playing on that instrument? What are you doing with that instrument? So you could be, amazing on a piano and really crabby at singing, and then that doesn't make you better because it's the first instrument.
Right.
So here's my take on it. I always felt very connected to my body, and very connected, therefore, to my voice being part of my body. It's only been through years and decades of teaching that I've noticed that that's not automatic for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. For a lot of singers, singing is something that takes place in their throat, not in their entire body. And that's something that I've started to work with in my students, and sort of be more aware of in myself, that singing, even some of it is highly complex and highly difficult to execute, that it still needs to be coming from your body, right? And so jazz singing, or whatever you want to call creative contemporary music, has become so challenging in its parameters that oftentimes that connection falls behind. And I think that dance and movement can really connect your body to an expressive, to a way of expressing yourself, and connect your voice to that as well, if you through certain exercises. And so for me, it's always been sort of automatic, and only because I'm seeing in my students that, wait, no, they're struggling with that, and that's not a given. And especially now, with us sitting in front of computers and in front of screens all day, that sort of idea of not being embodied is even more prevalent.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I guess like the way that the ear and the vocals connect, that seems like another sort of level of embodiment. But how do you sort of like think about that as one unit, like the ears, the throat, the mind?
I think they have to work in tandem, and sometimes one thing becomes more important than the other. Sometimes you have to think more. Sometimes you have to feel more. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's just I think that I'm a little bit afraid that we're losing this connection and not minding it. I think that technology is changing us in ways that we don't predict and can't predict and don't even know that we're being changed. It's like sort of a sleight of hand. We're really into, hooking up through apps, and all of a sudden we don't need to hook up anymore because, watching porn is enough. And so suddenly you lose the human connection completely. I'm using sex as a very cheap example here, but I think a case could be made for watch out what you wish for. Watch out for all these podcasts, or if not podcasts, for these virtual concerts. We might not miss live performing that much. We don't know that. Everybody says, oh, we're going to go back, I want to hear live concert. Yeah, maybe once or twice, but then you might think, I'm not going to go out and drive for an hour and a half through LA traffic to hear this when it's being virtually broadcast into my phone.
Yeah, definitely.
So we got to be a little careful with our body and with our minds here, dealing with this technology.
I was going to ask this sort of more in the middle, but you sort of are getting at it already with the embodiment and sort of like the sexual reference. I know that you're a big fan of the music of Kate Bush, and the song "Cloud Busting" is just probably my favorite, and that's about this like technology from Wilhelm Reich, and I'm curious if that, like, if Reich or Reich, however you want to pronounce it, if that sort of world of semi-occult stuff is interesting to you, or if you have any investments in that.
I'm a part of QAnon. No, I'm kidding. What was interesting about cloud busting is that you take a pop artist like Kate Bush, and then you sort of strip away the layers of sophistication and source material, and to me that's more exciting than anything. Like somebody who creates this sort of pop world and pop persona, but uses literary references and psychology and these. There's so much in that song, as is in Hello Earth or in Wuthering Heights, or you name it. Like her material is very interesting, and it only gets deeper with more study and with more spending time with it, which is not always the case with pop music. Sometimes you have something you think is so wonderful and you spend time with it and it sort of fizzles away, and you're just like, there's not that much there for that long, a time. And that's fine, it's okay. But with Kate Bush, it was very, very different. And that was an interesting discovery, because I didn't know when I started my Kate Bush sort of project that would actually happen. I thought, well, I'm gonna write some arrangements and then would be done with it, but I'm not done with it.
In doing a record of all Kate Bush music, I guess, like, what does that sort of like preparation and like research look like in getting to know the music more and more?
Yeah, I grew up with her music. I knew her records very, very well, inside and out. Really, sort of was embodied. Her music was embodied. Those were the records that I sat down and listened to, not just, had them play in the background. I sat down and listened to every little nuance of everything over and over and over again, because there was no internet. I grew up in a little town. There was nothing happening. What do? You lay on your shag carpet and you listen to music with your headphones. So the preparation for that was reading her biographies and finding as much material online, research material, and reading her lyrics and just diving into what all these references are about, and doing as much as I can. The fun thing about Kate Bush is that she's quite the recluse. We all know that. And so there is a certain manageability. She wasn't Picasso, who like painted millions of paintings and shards and this and that. She was prolific enough so that you have a big catalog, but not like 3,000 songs and 100 million interviews. It's very manageable. It's sort of my size. It's for the lazy person.
Do you feel like you did most of the heavy lifting just in, you know, like growing up with her music and, you know, having just embodied it already?
Maybe, I don't know. I think there's no heavy lifting when you love something so much that it's really pure joy. So there was no lifting. It was just, oh, this is so fun and wow. There's a little bit of this underdog love that I have. I'm always sort of attracted by those that get left out, or are overlooked, or are not the most popular girl in school.
Mm-hmm.
And for Kate Bush, that was certainly true because she had a lot of pushback. She works on her own schedule. She is not swayed by commerce or popularity or any of that. And that's interesting to me as a pop artist.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was part of the appeal for me as well.
Cool. So I guess you know, I am most familiar with your duo with Ben Monder, probably, like, and to the extent that like I'm pretty sure that some of those like lines that you sing together or that you sing along with him in Oceana and all that is pretty much ingrained in my head from just listening to it so many times. And so I'm curious if you can tell me just about that duo project and sort of the origin of it, how you met Ben, any sort of like interesting anecdotes from your time playing together.
So I met Ben in '93, I think. I heard him at the Old Knitting Factory in Pat Zimmerle's group. And I heard his sound and I was like, this is a guy I want to work with. And so I called him up. I had a little gig at Cornelia Street Cafe, which no longer exists, unfortunately. And I had called Ben and I didn't hear back from him. And this was before cell phones and all that stuff. So I waited a week and then I was just about to call somebody else because I needed to make a decision on this gig. And he called me back, thank God, so I didn't need to call my second, choice. And we got together and there was instant chemistry in our playing. There was understanding, there was a sort of a friendly understanding. We could do this, we could do that. It felt very loose and very free. And so we started to work in duo for a while, and I had this regular gig at Cornelia Street Cafe where it allowed me to play every first Monday, or was it every Monday? I forgot. It's like some kind of, not Monday is big band night, but Tuesdays or some off night, first set, so we could develop some material. We would get a little bit of an audience. And over the years, we started to invite each other into each other's other projects. So whenever I can and whenever it makes sense, Ben is, of course, my first choice. And we've done a lot of traveling. There's a lot of history and a lot of friendship. And it takes a long time to develop something, as close-knit and as free and as easy. But it started right in the first rehearsal. That I know. I remember us playing a Norwegian wood, I think it was even, which we still have in our repertoire sometimes. And it was just so easy and so great. I didn't have to say, okay, here we switch to this drone and then we do this and then we do that and maybe we could do this. It was completely clear. So that kind of synergy is what's there. And, I think it was Oceana. I had just had a car accident and I could not see very well. At first I was blind and then I sort of regained some vision.
Interesting. Wow.
And Ben had asked me to record this music with him. And I said, Ben, I can't do this. I cannot record this music right now. It's too much. I'm overwhelmed with even recovery from this accident, which we were both in. We were both in this. He was driving and there was a deer jumped in front of the car after a duo gig in Rochester. And he sort of tried to find somebody else, like he found a male alto, but that didn't work for him. And then, months went by, and then I finally just like, okay, I'll do these 2 songs or 3 songs, whatever. And it became more and more. And it was the knowledge that he knew that I would sound best on this. I'm sorry, just that also helped me, pushed me into really doing my best and doing something that I sort of was like, oh my God, I can't learn all these notes right now. I'm just too, and then it was really fun and it became this really fun thing where I sent him these files and then he was like, yeah, but try this vowel and that, with this thing, and let's double track everything. So I sang everything twice, so that it, sounds thicker in the mix, and so forth and so forth. So it was a true collaboration in that sense. And also, I'm very grateful for Ben in this instance that he just insisted that I sang it. So that was nice.
Can you speak a little bit more about what these files that you're exchanging were?
Well, I was recording at home because he had already recorded the tracks with the band, and I think he had also recorded some of the solos, and so I was singing some of the melodies that he had written, not some, all of the melodies that he had written for me, and then sent them to him, and then we were like, he's like, you know what, let's try let fewer consonants on this, or this sounds, it's like, yeah, it sounds kind of hokey there with the da, 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 da. So we were sort of, for the most part, it was fine. I tried different, sometimes if you sing on the lower notes, you don't get as much attack, and you just don't really feel the rhythmic articulation sometimes. So we would change that. He said, is there any way we could get more articulation on this phrase, or I don't really feel the counter rhythm to this. So it's a lot of fiddling around and trying what works best in the moment, because we really had no idea. My idea was I insisted, or I really felt strongly about double tracking everything, because the voice by itself, unless you have this like metallic, like bullet stream of a voice, which I don't have, it sounds often just too spread. It sounds like a French horn, but is this a melody? Are we supposed to listen to this? Is this just somebody improvising, random notes in the background? What is this? So for it to be quite aggressively pointed required for me to track everything twice.
Interesting.
And that was good. I liked it. It sort of also dehumanizes me a little bit, makes me a little bit more of a choir in a way, but not really, because it's only two people, but it's the same person. So it's a special sound that you can't get from just one person singing. One person singing is almost too emotionally like drawn, like, oh, there's this person I have to listen to now. Whereas two people or more, a choir, and you hear this in soundtracking a lot in movies, but if there's just a blend of voices, the ear becomes less drawn to only that voice. This makes sense, obviously, because you're not telling an emotional story here. You're actually just becoming not an instrument. I don't want to say it like that, but you're blending more with something that is more abstract.
Gotcha. Interesting. I guess I didn't even have a sense that those were doubled, or that there was like any sort of back and forth, or I didn't think about the process in general. But how difficult would you say Ben's music, or like those sort of projects were, compared to anything else that you do? Like, is that even challenging to you, or is it particularly challenging?
It's challenging to me.
Good.
It's super hard on the page when you're just rehearsing it by yourself. You're like, what the fuck? This is like a 12-tone melody out in ether with, these weird rhythmic changes. And then actually, when you're doing it with the music, it's suddenly, wait, this is not that hard. It all falls into place and it all makes sense because Ben is such a great composer. The mosaic of these weird random pitches suddenly are not random anymore, and they're supported by this note or that note. So yeah, it's good that way, rather than, oh, this is easy, and then you start recording, it's like, wait a minute, it's really hard. So that was a nice process. I'd done a project with Mark Dresser, bass player, and Dave Douglas and some other New York players in the 90s. That was possibly sort of setting my meter to this kind of complexity, with tons of metric modulations, completely atonal, rhythmically, absolutely weird kind of music that until then, till 94, it was either free jazz or kind of modern jazz kind of aesthetic, and I've sung Webern or Schoenberg, but that never in this rhythmic precision had I dealt with atonality. And so that was it's a mountain, it's always a mountain, especially when you're dealing with overdubs of a choir, and some of it is so far at the edge of your range that you can only do so many run-throughs of it until you're like, okay, I'm tired now. So yeah, it's on the edge, and once it's recorded, it's easy. That's always my experience. Once a thing is recorded, you're like, it's not that hard. When it's just a page, you're like, what?
I'm glad to know that you are indeed human. So I'm curious, with like just rehearsing that type of stuff and just like all the challenging music that you do, like like what is like the Theo Bleckmann woodshed like? Like how I guess like what sort of like practice routines have you done to like get through this?
I mean, that depends on the music and what. So the greatest, one of the many great things that John Hollenbeck once said in a master class that I was witnessing, he said, practice what you don't know. So for especially when something is hard, you want to practice the stuff that you already know, and it makes you feel good, and you're like, yeah, I know this kind of. So I try to really shed the stuff I don't know, and then I try to analyze why I can't do something, whether it's the combination of interval and rhythmic complexity or whatever, and try to shed them separately and see what's what. It really, really helps to understand composition and compositional process, and oftentimes you realize as the interpreter that, oh, this is the same building block, this is the same figure, except it's inverted or something. To me, that makes it easier. I don't feel like it's just random. Randomness to me is the hardest. But when there's compositional structure, I sort of feel, okay, here we are again. This is that, la la la. Order in the village. So, what does my shed look like? It's very empty in that shed, I should say. I'm very lazy, so I don't shed very much. But it's usually if something is so complex that I can't sit there and hammer it out for 10,000 repeats, I often put it into a loop on my recording and just let it play and wash over me sometimes until I find myself singing along automatically. And that was I started that sort of idea when I started working with Mark Dresser in '94, because that music was just, I'm telling you, that music was so rangy and so out there, and because Mark Dresser was in Braxton's band for 20 years, the whole octave displacement thing was really prevalent, and I was like, what? And so I had made a cassette tape that I had on my head for most of my time for 3 months to just learn these weird melodic things and feel them to be embodied and feel them like I'm singing something, not just a machine hammering out pitches.
That's interesting. I'm personally really interested in complicated, complex music, and I feel like I will do things like that, like leave on a complex polyrhythmic metronome type thing, and eventually I just feel like I'm sort of doing some weird like psychological manipulation of myself, and like I can't do it around other people. I have to be in headphones, but I don't know. That's interesting to embody it until it's easy.
Yeah, because for me, this kind of music, I think music can carry a lot of things. I mean, it can carry emotion, it can carry complexity of thought, it can carry construct, it can carry architecture, as far as composition, it can carry many ideas and philosophies, and it can be a lot of things. Just like, the visual arts can be representational, they can be three-dimensional, they can be completely abstract, they can be monolithic, they can be daunting for the mind or for the emotion, for the heart. They can be assaulting. They can be very, very small and hard to perceive. So music has that same capability, and I don't think one is better or It's what the person is looking for. For me, complexity in itself has become less interesting as for its sake. That's why I love Ben, because his stuff is so complex, but emotionally very, very satisfying and very moving, actually. And Ben is such a deeply feeling person that always gets me. You know, he has that sort of sophistication, but it's never cold or it's never lonely in that sad sort of state, like you're on your own over here. Good luck with that.
So in college, like the thing that I love to talk about is that I sent him an email asking basically, can I study with you? Because I was hating college for music, and he basically responded with this email that, in the single email, was worth more than college itself. And it was very much about like permutations and this kind of like exhaustive way of practicing. And I think I've heard you speak about extended technique, or just like sort of like creating all these different approaches to, like, you know, the shape of your mouth to get like these different sounds. And they are both exhaustive techniques, but it seems like a little different approach. I'm curious, like how you think about just like expanding your palette of extended techniques, or just sounds that are available to you.
Like there was a time when I was working with Bob Ostertag. I don't know if you're familiar with Bob. Might be a great entry into another world of phenomenal thinking and composition. And so Bob Ostertag is a composer living in composer and political activist and a book author living in San Francisco. And we're still working together occasionally, but he was doing a project where he was recording musicians and then recording sounds and free improvisations, and then collecting these sounds and then making compositions out of them, and then having them play with those sounds, or, you know, whatever the process at the time was. So I spent hours and hours in the studio with Bob recording every which sound I could possibly make. And so that led me to transcribing all of these sounds and writing them down. And then from then on, practicing variations on variations on variations. So if I could make a sound, just a straight tone sound on a middle pitch, can I make it breathier? Can I make it harsher? Can I make it with a fry in it? Can I make it with a vibrato, with a wobble in it? Like all these parameters that I want to be able to manipulate, not because it's a gimmick, not because I can, partially, of course, but also because it can express certain things. And sometimes you have to put the cart before the horse in these things, because you discover things that you can do with your voice that you normally wouldn't do if you put two things together through process. You would not have gotten there sometimes through emotion. But then these two elements that you put together have an implication of emotion or emotionality within you, or within me, or they don't. Or the absence of emotionality is exactly what you're looking for. So every sound that comes from your body comes from your body in some way, right? So I was cataloging all these things and sort of keeping journals of sound, and it's really expanded my palette, not necessarily in free improvisation and making more crazy sounds, because yeah, I can do that any day. Anybody can do that, really, you know. But in combining that sound while I'm singing other stuff. So in Ben's music, some of that goes into the sound that I'm making. So whether I'm singing an E, or I'm singing an E, or E, those are all manipulations in my pharynx. And the closer you look at those, the more variants you can make, the more you can blend, the more you can stand out, the more you can be softer, harder, more feeling, more mechanical, whatever you want to be. It gives you more choices, and it gives you a world that is normally not accessible to you when you're singing normally, because what's asked of the jazz singer, and quotation marks for the podcast, is to be yourself. And as if that's one thing, like
Right.
we're one thing all the time. Like, no, I refuse. I refuse to be one thing all the time.
Hmm.
So therefore, I want to have as many things available as I can. Can you tell I'm a Gemini? So is Ben, by the way.
Interesting. I'm not that hip to the astrological stuff.
Me neither, but it applies to my sign. So that's all I care about. Me.
So in terms of exhaustiveness, also, like I feel like you have a second line of attack, which is like using loopers and using like ways to extend your voice that aren't sort of built into your physiology. How do you think about that differently from the sort of built-in physiology approach?
Yeah, I think of my loops as an extension, orchestrational extension of what I would like to be able to do if I could physically. I never think, or I rarely ever think of loops as replacing anything else or anybody else. And I think that's quite different from what these things are built for, which is to accompany yourself. So you sing the bass line first, or you start with the rhythm, and then you sing the bass line, and then you sing the horn parts, and then you put the melody on top, or whatever order you want to do. I don't think of that of my rig like that at all. I think of it as more voices, more of myself in some kind of a constellation of color clouds of sound, or very painterly, very like swashes of sound. But they're all human. They're all from me. Rarely do I emanate, I would say never, emanate another instrument. I would never imitate a trumpet or, pretend to. And then it repeats and repeats and repeats. And the thing that's really annoying about loopers is what they're made for, which is the repetition. And the constant hearing the same thing exactly the same way is kind of what bores me about them. So I try to figure out a way that's sort of a Mobius strip that you can't hear the beginning, but it just moves on to something else, perhaps. I recorded a solo album in 2010, I think. It was called Anti-Room. Or was it 2005? 2005. God, it's a while ago now. And I didn't use my electronics at all. I only used a long reverb / delay kind of thing. But there was no loop. There's no loop in it. And so all the layers are stacked. I did not want this loop feeling. I wanted it to be static. I wanted for the listener to feel like you're looking at a vocal sculpture, because everything is moving, especially in the beginning, very, very slowly at glacier pace, and you have chords that bleed into another chord, and these weird tonalities, and then you have this thing that starts spinning a little bit, and different voices. There's never, ever a melody in this. It's always long tones, or maybe 2 or 3 tones, but it's all long tones that get shorter and shorter. And then the last is it's like a 40-minute, 45-minute piece, and then there's a 4-minute piece at the end that has a melody in it. So the biggest part of it was really this idea of never-ending voice. Like the voice keeps going. And for me, that sort of extends also to the electronics, because there's a certain sense of complacency when you listen to looped music. And we're getting so used to it, and I'm getting so used to it, and it's so impressive, when somebody is stacking and is doing all these intricate harmonies, and it's super impressive, and it takes a lot of skill and a lot of practice. But ultimately, my heart always sinks a little bit when it comes to the 107th repeat. Right. So I'm trying to use it sparingly and use it sort of like a rolling glacier. They comes, and before you realize it, something has changed.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard you do things with the looper where, like, you drop that eighth note, and it sort of like has that 7 overlapping, and it's like it has
exactly. Yeah, exactly. So the trick, there's a lot of trickery. There's a lot of how can I make this last in the person's ear. And I've done a lot of minimal music, and minimal music is completely different from looped music, even though they could sound the same. But the wonderful thing about performing minimal music is the repetition and the humanity of it, that when you repeat something, that it's not the slight change. You might be trained to do it exactly the same, but the endurance of it is sort of what is exciting about it. And the endurance here is you just unplug it, that's all. But it could go on for 100 years, and it could not go on for 100 years with a human. They have to drink, they have to go to the bathroom, they have to do something, they have to sleep. And so the sort of that mechanical thing is what we are getting all too used to. We're getting all too used to it.
This makes me think of two sort of sub-questions. First of all, are you familiar with the music of Mick Barr, the guitarist?
Yes, Nick Barr? No.
Mick Barr. He's
Barr,
like a
no, I don't.
long hair sort of metal guitarist. Interesting. He's just very endurance based, and that's what made me think of. And he's based in New York. So,
yeah.
But the other question is basically just like, with all this repetition, there's sort of like a potential like trancey head state. I'm curious if you have any sort of like meditation practice, or if you do anything in that sort of domain of whatever flavor.
My new meditation practice is sewing.
Okay.
I just learned how to sew. My friend Henry Hay gave me a sewing machine, and I'm hooked. It's my meditation. That once that sound starts, it doesn't even matter if I sew well. That's how I start my day right now. I don't have a meditation technique practice right now. I used to, and I sometimes get into it, but no, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I do. No.
That's fine. Interesting. Okay. Let's see here. So I wanted to go through some singers and get your sort of like take on them, or just like what they mean to you. We've already sort of gone through some of them, but I was going to ask about Björk. I just love the album Medúlla, but like I feel like almost the focus here is like on Roselle and Tanya Tagaq. And are those singers that are interesting to you, or have any sort of influence for you, or?
Yeah, Björk. I know Björk a little bit. I went to her Thanksgiving a couple of years ago with Meredith Monk, who is one of Björk's biggest heroes, and she used to come to Meredith's concerts, and then we would hang out afterwards.
Nice.
Björk is incredibly inspiring. It's actually, Ben played me, I think, Post or something, an early album of Björk. I remember coming over to his house, and he had this cover. I'm like, oh, I've seen this at Tower Records or something. He's like, yeah, this is great. So he was actually the first one that played Björk for me. Because I was very snooty about pop music, and I barely listened to pop music when I was younger. Björk is fantastic. Medúlla is interesting because that album was based, or it was highly inspired by Meredith's work and her vocal ensemble. And so she said in a lot of interviews that was her main inspiration for that album. However, it's interesting that the album was made in overdubs and sending, things around the world, whereas Meredith would never do that. Like, she never overdubs it. Like, it's always about the ensemble and always about the process within the ensemble, which led me to listen differently to that album, because it does have this fragmentation of this person is over here in this physical and emotional space, and this person is over there, and that works together, obviously. But in Meredith's work, there's sort of a circle around everything. There's sort of a community, and to think of music making as a community is quite different than I'm sending it to this person because they can do this, and that person because they can do that. And so I think therein lies the revelation about something. I mean, one of my favorite albums of Björk's is Vespertine, no question. I mean, that album, it is still to this day is absolutely genius, brilliant, compositionally and orchestrationally, and in every which way. I think it's one of those desert island discs.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite song off the record?
Aurora got a spark.
I'm a sucker for Cocoon myself.
Yeah, I mean, every song on it, everyone's like, oh, wait, this song again. Oh, yes. It's great.
So with like Tanya Tagaq and Roselle and these sort of like out there singers, are those people that you follow, or like you know, they're sort of like weird extended technique, beatboxing, throat singing? I don't know. I just wanted to see where your mind goes with that.
It's not. I mean, when I hear them, I'm completely blown away, and I'm like, "Holy guacamole! This is unbelievable." But it's not something I would listen to on a record. It really, for me, requires the live space and the concert moment and the celebration and the sort of watching it as part of the ritual to me. Hearing it on record is, I know it's, you know, they're doing it and all that, but it's not as exciting to me.
Gotcha. Something that Ben and I also share is a love of like extreme metal and death metal and all this. And I'm curious how interested you are in that world of like guttural sounds and all the strange things that they get into.
Yeah, I mean, it's only because of Ben that I even would consider listening to it. And I've gotten very much into it, you know.
Okay.
I mean, the early Meshuggah stuff has made it, you know, you can listen to something once or twice or three times and it makes a huge impact on you. It's like seeing something like I don't want to say a train wreck, a car crash or something, but seeing something once can impact you, can impact you in a great way. And that I would say that for a lot of the metal, I don't need to listen to it constantly. Actually, Ben took a car ride recently and he was playing this thing, and after like 3 tracks he said, "But you have to turn this off. I cannot listen to this anymore. It's giving me not a headache, but it's my whole body tightens up." And he understood, you know, it's not for everyone to really listen to, sit to it, listen to it. But yeah, I can't sometimes. Sometimes I'm in the mood and I do it, but
from like the standpoint of extended techniques, or
oh,
like,
it's,
what do you think
yeah,
of that?
I mean, there's, you know, if you sing death metal with a proper technique, then yes, you can avoid injury, but it also, I do like this. It's this morbid, like, I don't give a fuck what my voice is going to be like tomorrow. Yeah, it's great. You know, it's like getting a tattoo of SpongeBob SquarePants on your forehead. Like, yeah, you might like this, might be cool today, but in 20 years, you might not want that there anymore. So for me, it's glad somebody's doing it, so I don't have to do it.
Yeah, I figured that maybe the safety element might creep in for you. And it makes me think of the band Pig Destroyer. And like, there's this video of the singer continuing to sing after the mic has broken, and he's singing over the rest of the band, and or singing is the wrong word for it, but it's just like that's going to damage you.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the appeal. This self-destruction thing is, to me, is very disturbing, actually, at the end of the day. It's kind of fun when you're in the moment and like, how cool is that? But not really. Really, you need to destroy your instrument and not be able to do anything. And maybe you do. I just highly recommend watching The Sound of Metal. Sound of Metal, it's called.
Is that like a documentary?
The movie where this guy, he's a metal drummer, and he gets it's an Oscar-nominated movie right now. It's a beautiful movie about this young man who gets deaf. He has his hearing loss. He loses his hearing from, you know, this loud pounding of the drums night after night after night, and how he deals with being deaf. So the loss is real. It's very cool when you're young, you know, to do that kind of stuff. But how long can you do that for? And that is a concern. Like, you have to, you know, I mean, Ben has had his bouts with tinnitus. I know that other, you know, because of just, it could be one feedback at a gig, and you're just, everything is changing. So yeah, there are ways. There's a vocal teacher in New York, Melissa Cross, who teaches that kind of singing, which is mostly done through a vocal fry and close miking. To me, it's a little bit monochromatic
Mm-hmm.
for my taste, as far as now do this only
Mm-hmm.
all day long. But
Oh.
it's incredible. It's incredible. And the rhythmic precision and the rhythmic complexity that this music has to offer is mind-boggling.
When you were cataloging all these different sort of sounds and techniques, did you ever have anything in that sort of domain?
Of course. Here's the dirty truth. Once you start exploring your instrument, for the most part, we all share the same sort of sound possibilities with your voice. Some people can do more extreme things than others, but at the beginning of each of these roads, we can all make that same sound. I can sing overtones, I can do fries, I can do this, I can do that. I can do clicking sounds. Every humanoid has the same vocal folds, and they're not that, male and female vocal folds are not that different from one another physically. They're just tiny, a little bit smaller. That's all. And the normal eye wouldn't even see that. So we can all make the same sounds. Just because you live somewhere means that you have grown up with a different tradition and different habits and language and all that can influence all that. But once you start, you're like, oh, and then you see, somebody else performing, like, oh, I found this sound, but in a different way. And this goes for all world music. You find all this world music stuff in your voice, and you're like, can I use this? Is this okay for me to use, even if I found it through another process and I'm not imitating somebody? So it becomes this, who owns the sound? who is allowed to make this or that sound?
So you mentioned Henry Hay a little while ago, and Henry has these like absurd political reharmonization videos on YouTube that I'm sure you've seen.
Henry is a brilliant musician. Yeah.
This makes me think of like I think it's just like the current world of technology in terms of like voice transcription and like voice deep fakes and like formant modeling and all this stuff. Yeah. And is this something that's interesting to you, or that you fiddle with, or just kind of like?
Not at all. At this point, no. That if I was 20 now, I would probably be interested in that, and I would be more computer driven. My goal is to get away from the screen more than get into it more further. So I don't. That's why I still work with these, good old loopers that you buy in a store, and you just plug them in, and you put a cable in it, and the microphone goes right into it. I'm fighting. I'm probably a dinosaur at this point, fighting for the relatability of what I'm doing, which is already far-fetched. Mm-hmm. But if I'm on stage and there's a tray with some stuff on it, to me that's better than a laptop. If I see a laptop on stage, my heart just sinks. I just get a softie. I'm like, ugh. Now I have to look at this Apple logo for the entire concert. Okay, great. That's number one. And secondly, for a person, even if they're, in their early to late hundreds, to see me push a button, do something, to be physically embodied in the making of this weird sound, or that they might not quite understand what exactly goes on, but they see that something is happening. That's different from staring at a laptop screen and typing and checking your email or not, and here's the other dirty secret. Let me just, my dishwasher is beeping. The other dirty secret is that I found that with Max MSP or whatever these programs are, everything starts to sound the same. And it is, remember when Photoshop came out, maybe you're too young, in the 90s, and every record cover had the same 12 effects on it. The drop shadow on the font, and the this on the photo, and the stencil here, and so once you have these parameters, you want to use them. So the machine sort of dictates what it sounds like, and they all sound bloopy and click. There's enough of that out there. I don't need to be the person that makes it. And then here goes the same thing. Like, some people make beautiful music with Max MSP.
Mhm.
beautiful. And so I don't know that they're making it with that program. That's what's good.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, I agree with all that. Uh, excuse me. In terms of like sort of odd extended technique singers, are there any other influences that you might direct me towards? In terms of like the weirder sort of side of things.
Yeah, I can. Let me pull up my list of. I've compiled a very long and extensive list, and it is. Of course, Meredith Monk is number one on that list, or is one of the many number ones. Let me just put that up. There it is, playlist. So one of the great male singers, no longer alive, is Al Jarreau in jazz, and he in the 70s started making sounds and maybe to the point of imitating instruments to an extent that opened doors for Bobby McFerrin and many others to follow in a musical and joyous way that is just, if you go to Look to the Rainbow, that double album that Al Jarreau made in the 70s, and listen to Take Five. There's also a great Take Five video on YouTube from the NDR, German Hamburg radio. It is mind-boggling how freely he combines text and sounds and anyway. But one of the more out there singers is Demetrios Stratos, who is also no longer alive. Was an Italian singer with Greek origin, and Demetrios Stratos made records only with his voice that I think nobody could possibly ever do, because he had these weird capabilities to make sounds that I don't even know how, some of it is even sounds overdubbed, but it's not. And there are live concerts and there's videos of him. He was this rare animal that could make these unbelievably interesting, weird sounds. So Demetrios Stratos, I would say. Kathy Barbarian is a good. Jaap Blanc, of course, from the Netherlands, is doing a lot of sound and performance art and Dada kind of performance stuff. Jay Clayton also worked with Steve Reich, one of the sort of sonic explorers. There's Ursula Dudziak, Bobby McFerrin, of course, more in the jazz world. There's Kurt Schwitters. I mean, we have to give kudos to Kurt Schwitters with his Ur Sonata from the 20s. 1920s. Shelley Hirsch, amazing improviser, has worked with Zorn and Deck Circle. Brilliant performer and also embodied, sound maker with storytelling capabilities. You have a former student of mine in LA, Odeya Nini.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of her. She's wonderful, and she makes the wildest, craziest sounds, and she's an improviser and sort of spiritually influenced by meditation, and just a wonderful improviser. So Odeya Nini, I can give a shout out to in LA. There's lots of people doing wild and crazy work these days.
Well, none of those are familiar names to me, so I have a lot of listening ahead.
Yeah, there's lots. I mean, I have a list that's like 50 names long.
You said that the number one name on there is Meredith Monk, and I wanted to sort of like just get any sort of insider lessons or like insider information, interesting inspirational stories or whatever, anything that you want to share, because I know that you've been working with her for ages, and she's amazing. So
I mean, what I've said about the process of building a community and building music on the performer extends to what Ben and I are doing with each other. Is really we're creating parts for each other that nobody could play. Really, I mean, I could think of a few people that could sing my parts, but it's kind of bespoke music making. It's sort of like I'm making something highly complex, but it's only for you. And that's exciting. It's sort of watching something very rare and very specialized, you can't sing along to any of it. So Meredith's sort of aesthetic and her process is really what changed my thinking about how to make music, because my idea of composing and creating music was always, I'm creating this music, and then this is the jazz mentality. This person could play bass, or this person could play guitar, or this, it doesn't matter because the music is so great and I'm so great. That's not the case for most of what I do, because what I write is very strange and weird. And then the instrumentalists take it 10 steps further than the stuff I wrote. So then the final result is so meshed up with the initial idea of what I had, or some sketch that I had, and then they play something better than what I had or different. And so then I'm left with this hybrid of what I wrote and what they put into it. And nobody can really replace that. I can tell a person to listen to what he's playing, but that's not fair either. So I'm in this weird place of, making people irreplaceable. I'm actually having this very problem right now, because I'm offered a gig in San Francisco for my elegy project, my elegy record that I recorded with Ben, and Ben can't do the date. And I'm like, well, is this going to fall, this gig, with Ben not being here? So I'm waiting for Ben to, he always comes around.
Man, interesting. The sort of like a non-replaceable aspect is interesting, and I'm sort of curious. Something that I've been pondering. These days we have this obsession with like putting valuation on art just based on the final product. I'm wondering, do you think that if somebody puts in the time, that it's predictable that they will sort of reach a point of critical sort of like escape velocity and be amazing artists, or do you think that it requires something besides just the dedication of time?
What is your goalpost here? Like, what is critical acclaim, or financial success, or everybody knows your name, or
just like there's something that's like you can tell is special on sort of an embodied level of just like something has accumulated and become synergistic here.
Yeah, but some people fall through the cracks too. I know a few composers and a few really, really great players that, for whatever reason, whether it's their personality or whether they moved to Ohio because their wife had a job there, they don't have that. They didn't get what they should, I think, should get or deserve. And how they make peace with it is another story. I think it's really unpredictable. I've seen a lot of talents come and go, and I've seen a lot of semi-talents make it and then not make it, or it's a bit of a chaos. If you maintain a sense of joy with what you're doing, and a sense of satisfaction without any attachment to this should happen, this has to happen, then you're good. I think then it will happen. It's weird, but if you're attaching yourself to, oh, I got to be on the Downbeats best list, or why am I not on the Downbeats best list, or why am I not getting this grant, or why am I not on TV, or why aren't people buying my record? What this like attachment to the outcome. Let's not kid ourselves. What I do is very, 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 for a very small audience. And when people ask me now, what do I do? I say, or what kind of music do? I say, I make music that you probably won't like, which puts them off the hook right away. And they're like, no, I'm sure I'll like it. And then they want to like it. And I can tell it, for the most part, it's okay. It's okay. I know that what I do is not for everybody. And just because I sing, and because I sing, quotation marks, jazz, or, where would you file that? And then people oh, you mean like Michael Bublé? No, not like Michael Bublé. Like what? Like Bobby McFerrin? Yeah, not quite, but that's closer. But it's also not covering it. I guarantee you won't like it. You won't like it as much as you think you will. And that's okay. And the people who do, they like it a lot. And that's plenty.
Is this your like a sleight of hand to just ensure this? The reason I ask about this, like sort of putting in the work thing, is like I feel like nowadays there's this, at least like seeing like the younger workforce that is, you know, coming up these days. Like I think they like to tell these stories about why you should like something, and like I don't believe that as many people in the music world in particular are putting in the time. You know, like I think that there's probably, maybe this is just LA, but I think that there are a lot of people telling you about why you should like their thing without necessarily putting in the time. And
I think the opposite is true.
oh, really?
I think we are creating these skill bots that are just mind blowing. The musicians in New York are putting in the time, or they're just better than everybody else by default. I mean, there's so much skill. There's a skill pandemic. Everybody is so fucking skilled. It's unbelievable. And it's amazing. And the thing that I'm missing is mystery and risk-taking to a certain degree.
Okay.
Sort of getting your hands dirty and being a little bit more daring in a way with the outcome, because the idea of being liked or being admired or being accepted amongst each other is, of course, heightened through the internet and through, you know, social media and all that stuff. I don't feel like what you said is true at all in New York. Okay. I think everybody's extremely good. Like, there was a time like 10, 15 years ago where I would agree. Now it's not true anymore. The young people can all play their butts off. They're great and they're emotionally beautiful, and I'm being blown away every day. It's incredible what's out there.
Maybe Los Angeles is just a little bit higher or something.
I love LA. I think you have. I would love to move to LA. I think LA is the bee's knees. So maybe one day.
You should make the jump.
Yeah.
Well, the last question I'll ask is just if you have anything that you're working on right now that you can tell us about, or anything that's up and coming to be excited about.
Well, what I'm excited about is what just happened, which is a CD release with the brass quartet, the Westerlies, which I which I collaborated with, and we collaborated on a song cycle. We called the record "This Land," but initially it was called "Songs of Refuge and Resistance." Because they were in response to Trump getting into office and all this. So the idea was to make not a protest record, a refuge and protest record that actually is really, really beautiful and seductive, rather than "you must know what we think about politics." Not that kind of, you know, record, obviously, and a very seductive and irresistible kind of music about resistance, about really like-minded people doing something in a time where you just feel like, okay, this is just the biggest shit show of all time, and what is going on, and how can we do something aside from, and I don't believe this at all. Like, I don't believe that just because you're an artist, you're political. That's just all self-serving to me. Being a musician or being an artist, which I try not to call myself an artist because I think that it's absolutely pretentious. But doing what you do musically is often very self-centered and very self-serving in the world. Let's just face it, you know. And yes, you're making the world a better place because people listen to whatever. At the end of the day, you know, it serves you and you're fulfilling your dream. You're not handing out food at the food bank, or you're not sewing clothes for people or whatever. So let's just be all honest about this, and just say, yeah, some people really take something with them, but so we were trying to do something a little bit more, you know, dealing with the subject at hand, like where are we, and let's respond to this. Not just be ignorant and just keep doing our thing, and that's our message. So yeah.
And so it's, I mean, that's very much like not like persuasive political music. It's just like more like, is the goal to more inspire or empower or just
Is to preach to the choir, actually, to say to the choir, be strong.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Because, our audience is not going to be QAnon Trump voters. No way. No way are they going to listen to this record. And if they would hate it.
Mm-hmm.
So, but sometimes it's important to know that we are hearing each other, that we see each other, that we support each other, even in this, in this time. And for us to take, union worker songs or set poetry of refugees to music elevates that discussion to a place of music. And I think that, and makes it beautiful, makes the struggle beautiful and something that we unite with each other.
Awesome. Well, I've listened to some of the record, and these harmonies that are coming out are very, I don't know what the word is, but I like them a lot. And these like sort of, I feel like there's like a sort of major 7th like clustery thing that's very nice and rich. And
Americana, Copelandy kind of, kind of feel to that. Yeah, absolutely. And that's good, because it is called This Land. It is about where we are in America and where we all stand as, there's a trans person in the band, there's a gay guy, there's an Indian American. So there's different, creeds and different sort of waves of investments in this that are part of this project. It's nice. It's
awesome.
nice to feel that. I mostly want to say that the Westerlies, like Ben Monder, have the sound that it's like you just can't, like you just cannot. Your heart just goes, oh my God, what? So that was, again, what drew me to them and still draws me to the Westerlies is their impeccable idea of sound.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes also back to what I was saying about exploring your sound. Just because you're exploring your sound doesn't mean that everything that you do has to be extreme. Actually, it sort of solidifies the core more than anything. And I feel that the Westerlies have done all that homework. They can make every crazy sound in the book, and they make every crazy sound with each other, and they make the most beautiful, most heartfelt. It's like a rock band. Like they work together so closely that you just can't resist. It's just like, oh, okay, I give up. Here I go. Here come the waterworks. So that's what I'm looking for, and that's what I'm attracted to. Amidst all the other complexity and
mm-hmm. Awesome
stuff.
Cool. Well, everybody should check out that record. Anything else that you want to mention before we sign off?
No. Just follow me on Instagram.
Cool. Well, awesome. Theo Bleckmann, thanks so much for sharing your time with me. It's been a lot of fun talking with you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. All right. Well,
be well. Bye, John.
I'll talk to you in the future.